I'm joined now by the communications director for Barack Obama, the co-host of Pod Save America, and one of the smartest people in politics that I've ever met, Dan Pfeiffer. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time.
Well, that was very nice of you, Brian. It's good to be here.
So we've watched with the Epstein situation as it continues to devolve. Obviously, Donald Trump is in a full-blown panic about this, and this new strategy that he's putting forward is not to say that it doesn't exist, but rather to say that it does exist, but that it's a hoax being put forward by the Democrats, that it was created by Barack Obama, Joe Biden, James Comey, John Brennan, and he's trying to put it in the same lens as we see, that his base sees the Steele dossier and the Russia hoax, and so clearly he's trying to frame this through a partisan lens so that we can just sort it in the same way that we sort all other political issues, in hopes that it will, make the folks on the right go back to the right and folks on the left go back to the left, and we can look at this is in the same way that any other issue is perceived. And so how effective do you think that strategy is going to be for Donald Trump?
I'm not sure it's going to be that effective because normally when Trump is in some sort of scandal, it really is about the people who are mad about the scandal, the people who already hate Donald Trump. The people who are communicating about the scandal, who are yelling about the scandal, who are reporting on the scandal are people who Donald Trump's base does not like and does not trust, right? But this time it's not Jim Acosta or Rachel Maddow or
Yeah.
Brian Tyler Cohen or Pod Save America screaming about it. It is Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Laura Loomer, people whose Trump's base trusts. And so it's going to be much harder to just dismiss this as Trump has done with all the other ones. Like maybe he can one by one get these people back in line, but the fundamental playbook that Trump has used for all his previous scandals does not work in this one because it's a fundamentally different scandal. His political problem is coming from the right, not the left and the center.
Do you think that there is some risk posed to these people in terms of their credibility? I mean, you've got Charlie Kirk. He was obviously, demolished when he went online and said, after covering this issue for months and years, going online and saying, you know what, I'm just going to defer to my friends in the administration, and basically just serving himself up as a lapdog for this White House. Do you think that really will have some lasting impact on the credibility of these people who do decide that, okay, maybe I'll just come home to Daddy Trump and make it just easier on myself?
Yeah, I'm not sure that credibility has been a real calling card of Charlie Kirk's over time, but
Right.
like ultimately all these people are people who have an audience, right? And their political power, their financial success is based on their relationship with their audience, that relationship of trust. And if one day you think this is the biggest scandal in the world, and the next day Donald Trump told you it's not a scandal anymore and you're not going to talk about it, that could burn some bridges with at least some part of your audience. I think it's really interesting here that like so much of Republican politics generally, but Republican politics in particular, is about attention. And Trump has been able to keep people in line because there has been bad business politically and financially to be anti-Trump, right? The publications that like Weekly Standard that were somewhat anti-Trump went out of business because there was just no
Right.
audience for anti-Trump content. But here in this situation, these people are putting out anti-Trump content. And if their viewership, their engagement was falling through the floor, they would stop. And the fact that they're continuing to do it tells me that the incentive structure within right-wing media over this issue is one in which does not benefit Trump.
How unusual is this situation where Donald Trump, of all people, say whatever you want about Trump, but it's clear that this guy is very adept at controlling the narrative. I wish we had Democrats who had the ability to control and weave the narrative in the same way that he does. How unusual is it for somebody like him to have so little control over what's happening to the point where he's now, posting these long screeds about how stop talking about Epstein or demanding that these reporters, focus on other issues. I mean, the distractions that he's putting forward are so transparent. I mean, talking about denaturalizing Rosie O'Donnell, it really is desperate in a way that we haven't seen from Trump before, who again is usually really good at this.
Yeah, this is once again goes to why this one is different, which is we talk a lot about what a great communicator Trump is. How good is he at getting attention? He certainly is good at getting attention, but he is also the general in command of a massive army of media, right? He has this massive infrastructure, whether it's Fox News or all these podcasts we're talking about, the Daily Wire, Megyn Kelly, all these people, and they have been singing from the same song sheet for 9 to 10 years until right now. And so Trump is sending commands out to people to change the subject, but you can't, it's harder to do that if some of the biggest parts of your army they're not fighting for you, they're fighting against you.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't have he doesn't have the resources to change a subject or to drown out a democratic message that he's had before.
Getting into the actual scandal itself, I mean, where do you land on this? And obviously, what we're going to talk about here is conjecture because we don't know what's in the files. But like from my perspective, I came at this very critically. It's not my lane to talk about Jeffrey Epstein or conspiracy theories or anything like that. It's usually something that we often see much more on the right. But I'm just curious what you think is going on here, because we're in a situation where we see Trump literally opting to tell his own base that he doesn't need them anymore, rather than just show whatever information he has. And so logic would have it that if it's more important for you to keep what you've got under wraps than to have the continued support of members of your own base. And by the way, I think there was a YouGov poll that was just released that show when they asked the question of how many people think that the full breadth of the file should be released, the people who said no was 4% of Americans. And so to align yourself with all of 4% of Americans, I mean, what do you think is going on here?
I don't know anything. When this all first blew up, I was out of town on a family vacation and I was kind of watching it from afar and I was just kind of laughing about it. But when you just look at the facts, right? The facts are Donald Trump had a very close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump told New York Magazine that Jeffrey Epstein likes beautiful young girls. He was president when Epstein was arrested and died mysteriously. And that's not me, like whether that's mysterious or not. Those are the words of Trump and his allies that it was mysterious, right? They have raised those concerns. They release a tranche of documents from the Epstein files. They call it phase one, suggesting that there's going to be a phase two or phase three or phase four. Pam Bondi says the client list is on her desk awaiting her review for release. And then all of a sudden there's no client list and nothing's coming out. And anyone who says anything else is a Democratic Jim Comey shill. That just suggests to me that Donald Trump either knows he's in the Epstein files somewhere or is very worried he's in the Epstein files somewhere. He's certainly more concerned about what's in there than the massive amounts of political water he's taking on right now from space.
How big of a concern is it? Like, I've never worked inside the White House, but you were the communications director for Barack Obama. How much of a concern is it that Donald Trump, if some information does get released, that documents can be altered? And what are the implications of something like that?
I mean, we live in a world of with a sort of administration full of liars and AI, which would allow you to alter all sorts of things. There is probably, because this is a court case, it's been through investigation a lot of ways. There's probably some sort of paper trail. I can imagine if you're working in the White House right now, most people there probably don't know anything about what's happening. They just see Trump freaking out about it. And this story is bad for Trump, but it's also bad for him because he's in the moment where he should be trying to brand the big ugly bill or the Medicaid cuts, whatever you want to call it. And instead, that entire opportunity is being washed away because he can't. Anytime he puts himself in front of a camera, it's about Epstein.
Right. Well, I'm very much a student of the Dan Pfeiffer school of talk about issues that unite your side and divide the other side. We've got that, on a silver platter right here. And so how are you thinking about this moment where there are other big things that obviously deserve some attention, the implications to healthcare, which is very much a real issue. I think objectively, like a more important issue as it relates to life or death for so many millions of Americans across this country, food stamps that are going to be stripped away, energy jobs that are going to be lost, veterans that are getting fired. I mean, the list goes on and on. There are real life or death implications for the things that are for Americans in terms of the agenda that's being enacted by this administration. We have these ICE raids that are being carried out. But with all of that said, we do have an issue that is clearly having a major impact on Trump's base. And so how are you thinking about this? And with the limited resources we have in an attention economy, how are you thinking about what to talk about and at the expense of what not to talk about?
It probably doesn't speak very well of our political culture that at a time in which the president's repeatedly violating the Constitution, that masked agents are raiding parks and schools, that the Congress just voted to take healthcare and food away from people to pay for tax cuts for the rich, that everyone is talking about this.
Yeah.
But everyone's talking about this. And we don't have, as a party or a progressive movement, the megaphone to change the subject. So sometimes you just have to skate where the puck is. And this is what people are talking about. And we should try to do it to our advantage as best we can. Like if I was going through a list of, like, if I had complete control over what every voter heard, this isn't the issue I would pick, but this is the issue that every voter is hearing about right now. And so we want to do what we can to keep it in the news for as long as possible.
How are you thinking about right wing media folks or independent folks? Maybe, look, like, there's been a lot of talk about the manosphere. A lot of these people are very rightfully and visibly upset over what's happening, over what they perceive as Donald Trump overtly lying to them as it relates to the Epstein stuff. How are you thinking about them as allies in this moment? And like more broadly, a lot of folks on the left are pretty salty against these people because they were instrumental in helping Donald Trump himself ascend to power. And so how does that factor into things?
Look, if anyone has an audience filled with voters we could possibly get to vote for us, we should be willing to communicate with them. We don't have to agree with them. We don't have to endorse all of their views or everything they've ever said on a podcast studio or on a stand-up stage in their life, but they have an audience. And we should be willing to engage with them over that. Because if we can just persuade some number of people, like, look, what's been deciding on the last few elections are people who don't pay close attention to the news. The way in which you communicate with those people is to not just go on shows like ours, but also to go on the shows that are not primarily about politics. And whether that's the Theo Vaughn's, the Flagrant podcast, obviously Joe Rogan, then we should be willing to do that. I also think that this is a tactical maneuver for us, for Democrats in this situation. We have to, like, in a normal political battle, our audience is primarily these lesser engaged voters who are ideologically conflicted. They may agree with us on the economy, on like tax policy, but think Trump's better on inflation, or they want border security, but don't love mass deportations. Like those are typically, that's what we're trying to get in a campaign cycle. In this particular moment in time, the audience that is the most valuable audience for content about how Trump is covering up the Epstein files is hardcore Republicans. And we should know that you and I are not the best voices to communicate with them. Elected Democrats are not the best voices to communicate with them. The content that is going to matter to those voters is going to be clips of these Republicans, MAGA types, or sort of MAGA adjacent people from the manosphere, people who may have supported Trump, like Theo Vaughn, in the last election, but have real questions about what's happening now. Because that criticism really matters to people. It makes them raise questions about whether they, if these prominent people have some buyer's remorse about Trump, then that's what we want people to see more than yet another Democrat out there
Right.
sort of railing about this.
I think something that's been a little bit difficult to like wrap our heads around is this is like Donald Trump is not presented as himself as somebody who is like this virtuous figure. And so why do you think that this matters? Like this case in particular, when there's other evidence of Donald Trump being like a sexual abuser. Like we have the Access Hollywood tapes where he admitted to grabbing women and so why does this matter? But all of these other examples, like a decade at plus worth of examples of him showing how depraved of a human being he is, all of that gets swept under the rug.
Because for a large swath of the electorate, or at least enough people to put him in the White House twice, they were willing to look past a whole bunch of things. They knew Donald Trump was a thrice married cad. They knew he's probably gross around women. They probably would not leave their wife, daughter, sister in a room with him. They know he's a liar. They know he's corrupt. But what they believed, the one thing more corrupt than Donald Trump was the political system, and that he was a full-on outsider who could really harness the power of just being a giant asshole to try to tear that system down. And for a lot of the right, the conspiracy theories or the Epstein scandal was evidence of this corrupt political system that protected elites. Here you have this person who was convicted, who with relationships all throughout the most powerful parts of politics, Hollywood, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, convicted of sex trafficking, and not a single person who participated in this sex trafficking ring has been brought up on charges. And so that has led to like real suspicion that is this an example of the rich, politically connected elites protecting each other. And Donald Trump in this situation went from someone who was going to come to Washington to undo that sort of insular elite protection scam.
Right. His own flaws notwithstanding.
Yes, his own flaw. Like, we think that people think the system is so broken. There's New York Times polls that show that people wanted someone who would burn the system down, who would tear down the political and economic system in this country. And they were willing to they thought Trump would do that. But here Trump has become part of that system, right? Instead of exposing these powerful people, he's protecting them. So it's less even about what Trump may or may not have done with Epstein for a lot of his hardcore supporters. It's that he's willing to protect himself and all these other powerful people who may have been associated with Epstein.
Perfectly put. For everybody who's watching right now, if you want to see and hear more from Dan, you can subscribe to his newsletter, Message Box. I'm going to put the link in the post description of this video. If you're listening on the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. And also, very importantly, if you're on YouTube, subscribe to Pod Save America's YouTube channel. They are fast coming up on 1 million subscribers. It does not cost anything to subscribe. And importantly, when people come onto YouTube to get their news, so that they're not automatically filtered into right-wing channels and to right-wing independent media sources, make sure to subscribe, watch their content so that that lifts itself up in the algorithm. And this is a situation where subscribing, watching some of that content is going to help the entire left-wing ecosystem more broadly. So I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video as well. Dan, appreciate your time.
Awesome, Brian. Great to talk to you.